Tanya from Arinex, and today I've got Rebecca Swanson, who is our People and Culture Manager here at our team, and is looking after some interesting developments within legislation, how we're going to include them in our everyday work life. So hello.
Hi, thanks for tuning in.
So we'll go straight into it.
Sure.
Can you please explain the new legislation around the right to disconnect?
Yeah, sure. So the right to disconnect legislation is designed to regulate and set limits on the amount of outside of hours communication between employees and employers. What it's meant to do, the aim of it is really to increase the work-life balance of employees. So giving them the opportunity to ignore, allowing them really to ignore communications that come from their work outside of their normal business hours. The problem with that is though, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think Fair Work understood that. So they knew that all businesses would be impacted in a different way and have different operational needs. So they provided a range of guidelines. The legislation says that an employee can ignore a communication unless that communication or that refusal to respond is considered unreasonable. So unreasonable really can mean how long's a piece of string, right? And who's determining what that means. Fair Work provided a lot of guidelines around what unreasonable might constitute to really help organisations and industries at large be able to understand this in terms of what it means for their business.
So Rebecca, what are some of the key considerations around this new legislation?
Yeah, so the guidelines are really the considerations that businesses need to consider and in, I guess, how this impacts them, but also how they put it into effect. So some of those guidelines around whether a refusal is unreasonable include the reason for the contacts. That's one thing. So if an employer is contacting the employee for an emergency, to check in on their welfare, to if they're on extended sick leave, but also maybe they might be on shift work and there might be a change to the roster that they need to be aware of or something like that. So taking into consideration what's the reason for the contact. Is it urgent or is it just something that can wait? Another thing is really the disruption, how much disruption that contact will make to the employee. So having a think about whether it's going to be highly disruptive and interrupt their personal time or their personal obligations. They may be carers, they may be on holidays, there's a whole range of reasons why that communication could be highly disruptive versus really not that disruptive. Another thing would be the employee's compensation level. So as we were saying before, if somebody is not really being remunerated and they're being paid award rates, then any outside of hours contact is probably deemed to be unreasonable. But there's a lot of circumstances where people are remunerated significantly higher than what would be, let's say, an award rate that is built into their employment contract to say that they should make themselves available after hours because they are adequately remunerated for some after hours contact or additional hours. And normally you would need to both find that in an employment contract and also perhaps in a position description. I know that for certain roles, we have that both in our employment contracts and our position descriptions. Some other things would be the seniority, the role specifically, and the seniority level. So if you have a more junior administration person or team member, they really are not that senior, they're not working on business critical information. But if you have a management team or more senior managers who are working on business critical information that may come up outside of hours, then the expectation is that they're probably remunerated accordingly and it is fair and reasonable to expect. Their personal circumstances need to come into effect as well. I spoke about whether they're carers, they may be on leave. There could be a number of reasons. They could be at medical appointments or different circumstances like that. So you can see now that there's all these guidelines that create a bit of a matrix or a hierarchy of decision making for each business to then apply, that the disconnect policy can apply not just to one organisation holistically and not the next in that way, but there's different ranging variables and levels within an organisation where the right to disconnect becomes more flexible for different roles and different seniority levels than for others, let's say.
So what are some of the unique challenges within the business events industry and the events industry as a whole in implementing some of these new guidelines and legislations? Because it's more than just guidelines as well, so there's a lot to consider.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So this was the task that the events industry as a whole really had to grapple with and figure out. As you know, that the events industry, we're renowned for long hours, we're renowned for working outside of hours to deliver events, and really if tasks don't get done in our industry on an event, then an event is significantly impacted. Not only the event, but our clients' expectations and deliverables. So it's been a very difficult industry, I think, to apply this to. So a lot of thought had to go into this. There was a lot of uncertainty that I heard amongst business event organisations and their leadership teams on how this was going to work. The other challenge that we have as an industry is that our team members are very conscientious, extremely conscientious, and they're not in the habit of disconnecting. Like, they're really not, and they take a lot of pride in their work. So we knew that was going to be a challenge of more so, not that people were going to want to disconnect, and that would impact operations heavily. My concern was that our team, I thought this was a really good thing, because teams in events don't know how to disconnect. So I thought that this was a great opportunity for us to really create some structure and give them some clarity and some directions on how they can disconnect, and it be a really learning journey for them as professionals on how they can get better work-life balance.
And I think one of the things that we've had to take into account as well in speaking to stakeholders, because we obviously work with suppliers and venues and hotels and everything like that, but also clients, there's also been a need, I think, for the team to communicate with our external stakeholders on how we work now, and it is not okay for the client to be calling after hours, etc., etc. So I think it also helps us as an entire industry, not just as an organisation, in terms of setting expectations on what's a safe working environment as well. What have you done in your role as the People and Culture Manager to ensure that Arinex is compliant with the legislation and that the team can understand and be briefed on what the expectations are from all of this?
Yeah. Look, the first thing we needed to do was to understand the legislation. When it first came out, there was a lot of confusion. People didn't quite understand it. The beautiful thing about Australia is, you have a lot of webinars and business association forums and discussion groups that always come together in times like this, when there is something that comes out that creates uncertainty, and people were a little bit scared of it, to be honest, at first. So the first thing I did was really engage in all of those groups so that I could understand it and understand where it came from. What is the intention? Because there's always an intention behind a new legislation or a new initiative, especially in employment law. And understanding that intention then helps you really bring that back to your business. So that was the first step for me. The second step was not only to interpret what it meant for Arinex as an employer, but also look at it from the point of view of our team members and kind of think, well, how's this going to impact them? And as I was saying, they don't know how to disconnect. So how could we really help use this as an opportunity to help them, give them a little bit more permission to engage in things that we already have in place, like our time and leave policies and our conference leave policies, and things that are there for them to have better work-life balance. So that was the second step, to really understand what it meant for us as an employer and our team. But we knew we had to really jump on the front foot and understand it and put something out in terms of a policy or some direction, so that we could get that clarity and start educating the team members in the business on what that meant for us. We've been working really heavily on work-life balance initiatives over the last 6 months anyway. Things like, updating our time and leave policies. We've got purchase leave within the business now as well. There's so many initiatives that we've been working on. We saw this as really, how do we extend on from what we've already done? So then what I did was focus more on the benefits. Not only how do we extend this, but what are the benefits to the organisation and to employees? And how can we incorporate them without impacting operations, without impacting clients' expectations and our deliverables to clients within the challenges that come with being in the events industry. So I worked really closely with our CEO, Nicole Walker. She was amazingly receptive to the policy that I was thinking about and how I was drafting it. So together we drafted the policy and reworked it a few times to make sure that we had a bit of look forward and tried to think of every single possible concern or level of clarity that needed to be done in all the different circumstances that our team engage in. And yeah, then published that well in time, like well before the legislation came into effect. And then we went through a process of doing Q&As with the team, taking them through the policy, helping them understand it, allowing them to give us any question really, and we worked with them. You know, I remember that first session we did, there were some questions that came that I didn't know, so I had to go away and really think about it. And we did have that Q&A before we published the policy so that we could refine it and really get the team to help us develop it as well, which I think is always important in an organisation. And now it's really just up to us really monitoring, like, how is the policy going? Where do we need to make adjustments? Where is it working? Where isn't it? But I think the beautiful thing about it is it's given us an opportunity for our team members to really know that we are supportive of a right to disconnect and their work-life balance, really. And this is just another way within our business that we can show that support, and also try and help hold our team members who are a little bit too conscientious to account and look after their own personal well-being as well.
That's great.
Thank you.